Welcome to the Tudor Dixon podcast. I'm Tudor Dixon, and I'm glad you're here with me today. As some of you may know, but some of you might not know, Clay Travis and Buck Sexton actually encouraged me to do this podcast, and I was a little bit unsure of whether or not this is what I wanted to do, but they're such awesome encouragers of free speech. They've been champions of free speech with people really across the country. They launched the Clay and Buck network here on iHeart, and they also have Outkick. And my guest today is actually leaving ESPN to join Outkick. So welcome to this side of the world, Charly Arnolt. Thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Tudor, thank you so much. And you know what? The transition has already occurred. I have left ESPN. I am out at Outkick, and already only a weekend. I'm so happy that I made this decision. I can already tell it was the perfect one for me.
Outkick is getting bigger and bigger. Right now, we see people going more and more to Outkick. I mean, Outkick started mostly as sports. There is the ability to obviously speak about political issues. Is that why you decided that Outkick was the place to go after ESPN?
Yeah, you know, there's so many different reasons why Outkick was appealing to me. And I want to say that Clay Travis was one of the large reasons why I'm here today. Just like you said, it was your interactions with him and Buck. And in fact, early on, when I was getting to learn about Outkick, this was probably at this point about 6 months ago, I had dinner with Clay and Buck after being introduced to Outkick on a pretty introductory level. And the things that they were saying about what they wanted the network to be, what kind of talent they were looking for, what they were encouraging from their talent, how the idea of cancel culture didn't exist at Outkick. And Clay was, very steadfast when he told me, listen, if something is said on Outkick and the talent stands behind it, as long as they have done their research and there are facts behind what they're saying, I will never ever attempt to cancel anyone for standing up for what they believe in.
So did you feel like that was happening at ESPN? I mean, this seems really important to you to not have that threat looming over you, but we hear political statements from ESPN all the time. So did you feel like there was only one side?
Yeah, well, that's the thing is there's so many issues in sports that have now become politicized, whether or not we want to admit it. We have seen so many different sports just completely overrun by politics. And it's not like they're directly addressed, but they are because they're not talked about. Or only one side of the argument is addressed. You know, when you look at, for example, the trans issue, which right now everyone's talking about, ESPN always says, we want to keep politics out of our programming. But then on the same token, during Women's Month, they ran a 1-minute tribute to Leah Thomas, who is not even a woman biologically. Right. So it just doesn't make sense when there are so many incredible female athletes who have, paved the way for other females to do their things in the world of sports. And just there's so many things that they should be recognized for. And yet we're taking the time to recognize a biological man for their success during Women's Month. It just makes absolutely no sense. But then again, shows the rhetoric that ESPN is still standing by.
And don't you think if you have an iconic company like ESPN, I mean, really, this is the name of sports that we've all known growing up and little girls look up to, little boys look up to for little girls to see, instead of honoring a woman who's done something incredible in sports, you're honoring a biological male, an intact male, saying that he's a woman. I mean, it's just kind of mind blowing. But don't you think that when that happens, it changes culture, that ESPN has the power to change culture and change the way people think?
Absolutely. I think that there's a lot of women who feel this way too. They just can't speak up about it. Since joining Outkick and announcing the news on my social media channels, I have quietly heard from several of my colleagues from ESPN who have said, thank you so much for speaking up for those of us who can't. And that's so encouraging because there is a swell occurring.
So when you see people getting fired on other networks, why do you think it is? I mean, over the years, for multiple forms of harassment, isn't this somewhat of a form of harassment that women can't really speak their minds when it comes to something so serious as their achievements in sports? I mean, doesn't it kind of blow your mind that people have to be so silent about this?
I mean, absolutely. Because when you look at the Me Too movement, there were so many women for decades who were unable to speak up about, their instances of sexual harassment or what may have been in their pasts. And now it's like the same thing. Like, women are suppressed. They feel uncomfortable coming forward. So we're allowing something that's very uncomfortable to persist. And women, there's nothing they can do about it. And it's like, the Me Too movement was so celebrated by men and women alike. Yet here we are further into the future. And it's just another example of women not being able to speak up.
So what will you cover on Outkick? How will this change the way you talk about sports?
Well, it's an alternative way to look at different issues. And it's a way to cover both sides of issues at hand. I think that I have one opinion on matters, but I'm open to hearing other opinions. I don't think that there's room for only one opinion in each debate. So I would love to have a platform where other people can come share what their takes on things are, and we can have an open discussion, which I think right now is not happening in most places.
We've seen
we can address issues that just don't relate to sports, but also just culture and society in general, because a lot of those do end up spilling into the world of sports.
Of course. Yeah. We've seen President Trump go into fights and people are like, oh, don't talk about this. Don't actually acknowledge. But he's incredibly popular. He was a former president of the United States. Why is that something that you can't celebrate, that you have a former president? If it were a George Bush, if it were a Barack Obama, how do you think it would be covered differently?
Yeah, well, that's the thing is UFC has done something right. They have appealed to the voices who have not been heard for so many years. A lot of Trump's fan base who felt like they hadn't been heard for years. And that's why there was such an uproar when, it was Dana White and former President Trump and Kid Rock and Mike Tyson's all sitting octagon side the other night. And I think it's just a testament to what people are looking for out of sports. They want to feel like sports is a reflection of who they are and also what they're looking for. Because at the end of the day, here's the thing. Politics is getting inserted into every little thing that we do. I mean, it's a part of our lives. You try to look this way, it doesn't matter. You can't avoid it. You look the other way, it doesn't matter. It can't be avoided. Sports and politics don't need to go hand in hand. You've looked throughout history, and sports have always been an escape for people, right? Through wartime, depressions, downturns of every shape and form. The pandemic, a big example recently. And people were turning to sports as a way to distract themselves. Whereas now when they watch sports, they're still being confronted with the same issues that they're trying to get away from in everyday life.
That's true.
You look at the NBA bubble, right? For us sports fans, it was so exciting because we had been craving sports and craving competition. We finally got what was actually a really decent setup by the NBA. It was the best they could do. And it was actually the most competitive basketball I had seen in a really long time. I really enjoyed bubble play. But that also at the same time is when they started doing all of the social justice implementations, whether it being, stamping a moniker on the court or allowing players to choose different phrases for the backs of their jerseys. And it's like suddenly we're not watching basketball. We are being confronted with politics. And that's when some people started getting very turned off of the NBA. And you did see the numbers start to drop. And even as recently as this week, Phil Jackson, who's a legend in the NBA, he's won 13 championships as both a player and coach. He even said he doesn't watch the NBA anymore because—
Wow, I didn't hear that.
Yeah, because he just says it's just too politicized now. And it's gotten to a point where it's uncomfortable for him and it's uncomfortable for many fans. And that's not what it's supposed to be. And for a guy like Phil Jackson to say he doesn't watch the NBA when he has been a huge part of why the NBA is what it is today is saying something.
Well, you said something interesting. You said for many of us, sports is a reflection of who we are. And I think that is the case for people who played soccer when they were young, people who played football, people who— I think what people don't understand is that no matter when you were connected to sports, that for a lot of people is a lifelong connection. And I think that's what we saw when we saw the football players starting to kneel. And those people who saw football as a reflection of them went, well, wait, This is not who I am. I'm still patriotic. I still believe that this country is a great place. We have flaws, but we can work on them. And this was kind of a statement. It's broken. There's no way to fix it. We don't love it. And I think it turned so many people off in that moment. They walked away. We saw that the NFL started losing viewers and losing money. They changed quickly. I think they came back and said, you know what, we got to stop doing this, or the next season we're not going to have any viewers. And they brought their viewers back. Why wasn't that a learning curve for the rest of sports?
I think it's because of the athletes themselves. I think it's not about the leagues anymore. The players have a lot of power. They continuously are gaining more power each and every year. I look at the NBA as the prime example of this. You look at guys like LeBron James, who's going down as one of the greatest players of all time, but he also has made himself the poster child for many social justice issues. In teams, and the league doesn't have any control over that. And a lot of fans who love LeBron James then become obsessed with the things that he's tweeting and the things that he's saying. And so it doesn't just become about sports anymore. It becomes about politics. And, you know, when you're in a locker room, it's like your family. Like, I grew up an athlete. And a lot of my teammates I looked at as family members. And so your mind, it's hard not to be persuaded in one certain way when you're hearing one of your best friends and teammates preaching an issue constantly and talking about it and standing up for something. It starts almost brainwashing you a little bit because you're around them so much and you feel so close to them and you trust them. So now it's like the league, you know, it's uncomfortable then to take a different position. So now you're seeing a lot of players going in one direction, whereas I'm sure there's a lot of people who have different opinions and would love to stand up for themselves. But if you even look at the recent Phil Jackson issue of him speaking up against the NBA, Jalen Rose, who is a broadcaster for ESPN, also a longtime NBA player, one of the greats as well, called Phil Jackson a racist. Because he said that, you know, you're just being racist by saying that politics should be kept out of the NBA and you don't like watching the NBA anymore. And Phil Jackson, I mean, look at what he's done. He's clearly not a racist. And I just think it's unfortunate because it dissuades so many people from being able to speak their mind because no one wants to be called that. That's hurtful.
Right. Right. It's such a cruel word, but it's so effective at silencing people. I think that I look at what we've seen happening in sports over the past few years. And I think that you're absolutely right that especially young people, but I think people of all ages can start to see somebody that they idolize, that they look up to and take their position as fact. And that's where I wonder how challenging has sports reporting become? Because recently, I mean, a few years ago, LeBron James was the one out there defending China. And I think that the geopolitical climate in the world has changed so significantly that whereas in a few years back, we felt comfortable doing business with China, we now know that in the political world, in the true political world, China has become an incredible threat to the United States. China has been talking to our first and oldest ally. They have been out there talking to Russia. We know that they're supporting many of our enemies, true enemies out there, and they're becoming an enemy. I mean, they want world domination. So at what point, as a journalist for sports, do you have to say, actually, I have to take this into the political realm so that we make sure that even though the sports personality is saying this, you understand why there are dangers surrounding this?
Well, I think that's the thing, is if you are going to bring politics into the equation, which, like I said, a lot of people want to watch sports to avoid politics. Okay. But if there are issues that need to be addressed and you intend on addressing them, you need to address them from both sides. And that's right. The problem is you're seeing from most of these sports organizations, networks, they aren't addressing it from both sides. I think another big thing was the COVID mandates that started in 2020. You saw the requirement for athletes to be vaccinated. You saw Aaron Rodgers get absolutely murdered.
Yes. Yeah.
That he wasn't vaccinated, even though at that point, the efficacy of the vaccine was being highly questioned. Yet people were like, how could you? This is outrageous. When really,
even in tennis, look at what happened with the vaccine.
He missed his first US Open last year for the first time since 2017. They wouldn't let him into the country. It's just so outrageous because also this is, I mean, isn't there like such a thing as like medical privacy? I just feel like people just feel like they have the
Right.
right to know each and everything, little thing about people these days, especially when we all know at this point, like masks, we know they're not effective. Yet they were making people wear masks for such a long time. They were required to get into certain venues. They were required for athletes to wear when they were around their own teammates. It's just, there's just so many different things that were not questioned, but they were reported on as very straightforward fact. This is how it is. This is how it should be, without anyone saying, but wait, let's actually look at the other side of the coin. So it's tough. If you're going to talk about politics, you got to address both sides. But, you know, when you look at a place like ESPN, that doesn't fit within their rhetoric. It doesn't fit within Disney's rhetoric. And so they continue to turn their heads to that.
So what is your take on, I mean, Disney is a very similar situation when it comes to, I guess I would say it's a little different because there is no fighting back when it's Disney outside of, you know, people, I mean, it's a capitalist country. You can unsubscribe, you can step away from Disney Plus, you can not watch it, but they really have kind of cornered that movement with young people of slowly changing culture amongst young people. And as a parent, I've watched this over the years because we watched all the Disney shows and then slowly they started to become more and more not, I wouldn't say we were going into some of the really life-changing stuff, but more empowering kids to disrespect adults and creating a behavior of distraction and disruption. What is the answer to something like that? Do you think at some point Outkick has started? Do you think there will be entertainment that will be more conservative, have American values, go back to that level of respect from children to adults?
Unfortunately, I mean, I think that there are places that can try. I think it's going to be up to, you know, they have like the parental controls and the, you know, parents can dictate what their kids see and listen to. So, you know, if they were to say, you know, let's say Outkick released kids programming. Okay, this is what we're raising you on and what you get used to seeing so you don't crave all of the other stuff. Perhaps, but the problem is social media is so ingrained in our culture. And you look at so many issues that are being splattered all over social media. I mean, let's look at the trans issue, right? When you see a guy or sorry, I don't even know the proper terminology anymore, but we'll just Dylan Mulvaney all over the place on social media representing women now. And then you see kids who are watching Dylan Mulvaney. It's a form of brainwashing. And
you know, it's interesting because
all they do is consume social media from morning until night. It's just, unless you completely take it away, which I'll tell you, I don't have kids yet, but when I do, I am going to do my damnedest. They're not going to have access to screens until I cannot control it. I have no choice. I am going to shelter them far beyond what I ever thought I would, because I always wanted to be, you know, I want to be the cool mom. I am so scared to bring up a child in this world because it's not what it was when I was younger. And if we're already heading in this direction and it doesn't seem like things are slowing down, I really fear for what the future looks like.
Well, we've talked about how there are, you know, we're embracing men wearing makeup. And when we were kids, the Maybelline models, all of these makeup models, they were showing how they were putting makeup on in commercials. And it was really kind of like the next step in life. You know, this will someday be you putting makeup on. And that made sense because it's marketing. You would think that that's what the company wants, is little girls to say, yes, I want to be putting makeup on just like that. Similar to even Victoria's Secret. We've had this conversation on here before. I'm a mom. I've had 4 girls. I actually, when I walk past the lingerie store, don't want to see my body in lingerie. I want to think that I can look like Giselle. You know, I don't necessarily want to think I'm going to look like me.
Lingerie is not my thing. It never has been my thing. Give me some like comfy sweats. That's why I'm here.
It's just hard to see that we've changed so much that we are leaving the people out that actually want to feel better about themselves. You know, we're leaving out the people that want to, the little girls that want to say, oh, when I grow up, I'm going to wear makeup. And my girls have seen all of this. You know, I have 4 girls, so I've watched them see this. And it hasn't been empowering to them. It's been confusing to them. And I just think, why aren't these big marketing directors seeing that this is confusing rather than encouraging?
Well, it's interesting that you bring up both lingerie and makeup, because we've just seen in the past couple of weeks, Dylan Mulvaney was used for a Maybelline ad. So there's makeup, something that women and young girls really identify with. It's like a part of their coming of age, right? Oh my gosh, I get to wear makeup. Like I finally get to wear some lip gloss. And I remember I would sneak my eyeshadow to school in sixth grade and put it on in the bathroom because my dad would never let me wear it out of the house. And then there was just another lingerie company this past week that used a biological man to model its lingerie, which again, like that's one of those things like, ooh, you know, when I'm older, I'm gonna buy a teddy. I'm gonna wear some lingerie. And again, it's something that really identifies with women. And there's so many amazing women who would be great models for lingerie or great models for any makeup brand. And yet they're saying, you know what, forget all of you actual women, forget all of you who have, you know, actually gone through puberty as a girl and really felt what it was like to transition from girl to woman. Forget all of you. We're going to go with a man for this ad. It's a huge insult to women. And it is crossed over into the sports landscape with the trans athletes. It's such a slap in the face to women that they would say, you know what, everything you've worked for, everything that, you know, Title IX has helped you to achieve, we're just going to forget about it all. And you know what? Ultimately, what are we looking for? Are we looking for just complete co-ed leagues? I don't understand. Like, I don't understand what the end goal is here.
No, because I don't think that the average male wants to compete against women. I think they understand that there are so many barriers. There's dangers. Your men are tougher than women. I mean, we've seen just the volleyball player that was hit in the face with the volleyball because a biological man can hit that volleyball much harder than a biological woman can. It's tough, but we've seen this kind of trending toward this pushing women aside. Women have been pushed aside. There's not as much pride in being a woman. And like you said, when you see that the women who are being used for makeup, that are being used for lingerie, do not represent women, it's disheartening. What about patriotism? Why is it that patriotism is under attack? And that's something that I think that we see a lot in the sports world. And how do we bring that back? How do we say, well, no, you can love this country and still believe that we can change things and make things better on a constant basis?
Well, I think the whole point is that there's just such a confused mindset these days where people associate patriotism with suppressing the rights of groups that are trying to gain more traction right now. And people feel like, oh, well, if I say I'm a patriot, it means I'm homophobic. It means I'm transphobic. It means all these things, which it doesn't mean. That they don't go hand in hand. But people have gotten very confused because there's one group that's, you know, crying out that, you know, we're under attack. And if you support America and its traditional values, then you're not progressing like the rest of us. So it's just the whole mindset of the country has just gotten very skewed, and it's really a shame.
How long did it take you to make the decision to go to Outkick?
It wasn't a tough decision for me. You know, it's just there's just the weighing of what's going to be best for my career. What direction do I want to go in? Because I also realize by coming to a place like Outkick, there is the possibility that some doors could be shut down the road by some of the more traditional outlets. But then you also have to recognize, you know, what do I want my purpose to be? What's my goal here at the end of the day? Like, do I want to be able to have the freedom to speak my mind and, you know, have those that don't have a voice to be able to look to me to say, okay, yes, I can agree with that. And actually, you have encouraged me to stand up for my beliefs as well, which I've been getting a lot of from women. Like I said, I have had several of my former colleagues, not just from ESPN, but from former jobs, even you know, further down the line, reach out and say, I'm so proud of you. Thank you so much for standing up for the rest of us. So there's a lot more of us out there than people realize. But it's going to take some time because people are scared. People are scared to speak their minds. They're scared to stand up for themselves because fact of the matter is there's a lot of places where if you do speak up, you're out of a job.
Right. What do you tell people that say, how did you do it? And how can I do it? I mean, you must have people constantly saying, I feel like I need to do this too, but I'm afraid.
I think it's just going to take a lot of women or different groups just saying, you know what, enough is enough. And what are they going to do? Fire the whole company? If every woman says, you know
Right.
what, I can't do this anymore. What are they going to do? Or at least they're going to be forced to address the issue. They're going to be forced to talk about it. There'll be conversation about it. There'll be equal and fair conversation about it. So I just think it's one of those things that people just need to really do some deep introspection and find out, are you okay with the world moving in this direction? I think there's a lot of women in the broadcast industry whose, I guess, journeys into motherhood are a little bit delayed, right? Because a lot of us put
Yeah.
more time into our career at the beginning. So having kids isn't something that we think about so early on. But now that we're here, there's a lot of us who are thinking, okay, well, kids might be in my future in the next few years. And is this something I want for my children? It's not just about you. It's about the future generations as well. So I think you all really have to just realize what's important to you. How do you want to live? How do you want your families to live? And make a decision from there.
When you see someone like Megan Rapinoe, who was a champion on the soccer field, was able, fought for women to get equal pay or higher pay, and probably has her own endorsement deals now saying that she thinks that men should be able to compete with women on the soccer field. And another sport where you're making contact with people. I mean, it really is dangerous to have a biological male on the field with women playing soccer. What is your take on that?
It doesn't make sense. It doesn't add up. A lot of people really applauded Megan Rapinoe for taking a stand for women. Everyone wants to see women treated the same as men and have the same rights in a fair level of competition, which is being wiped out by biological men now being able to play with women on these same fields or arenas. So it doesn't really make sense. You have to wonder what her incentive is to make this blatant switch in mentality, because after fighting this fight for so many years, especially for, a lesbian woman too, who's probably fought a lot of her own battles throughout the years. It just seems like this would be something we would be able to look to her and she would say, listen, I've fought a lot of battles. I've been there, done that. And I think doing this to women is just the worst possible case scenario. So it's really sad to see.
I know. I think that was one of the more shocking ones, because I understand. I think I can understand from her perspective being torn between the two, because she has been a champion for both women's rights and LGBTQ rights. And I guess we saw which one won out there. But I think that has been a challenge for so many young people. They get caught in that same trap. If I support one, do I not love the other? And that's what I want people to understand. No, you can be supportive of both, but still say women deserve to be in a fair situation. I mean, we certainly wouldn't want women to feel that they can't be safe in their own sport. We heard a story about one of the women who was in a locker room with Leah Thomas that had been raped as a young person, raped in like at 14 or 15, I think, and was just traumatized by the fact that she was forced to be changing right next to a biological male. And that's where I think maybe we haven't thought some of these things through. I understand wanting to be loving, and that a lot of, like you said, these young people can look at this and feel like, yeah, I can be convinced by that. And I think that's a lot of what's happening. And we're forgetting that there's another group that still deserves to be held up and kept in a fair situation and a safe situation.
Yeah. I mean, fact is right now it's trendy to be progressive. If you're in the younger, the Gen Zers, it is that's what's trendy. That's what's cool. They want to feel like, oh, this is, I'm fighting for equal rights. And they really don't have any real understanding of what they're doing. They're completely destroying the fabric of women's sports by championing these new beliefs. And I just think ultimately we're going down a very slippery slope. I mean, because like we said, we look at swimming, Leah Thomas, that's an individual sport, still danger surrounding it, even just the locker room example being one of them. But, and you kind of alluded to this already, but soccer fields, basketball courts, football fields, what happens when a man enters those arenas and there's contact and they're very aggressive. I mean, someone is going to get hurt. There's people getting hurt when women are playing other women.
Right.
So what happens when you put a man into the mix? I mean, it's just there's no way to avoid injury like that because.
Well, in the fighting, when we've seen the boxing matches and the fighting, that seems really outside of the realm of common sense.
Yeah, and I also, it's just curious to me that a lot of the people that I've been hearing from since I started here last week and have started speaking out for the first time, a lot of the people who are coming after me on social media are clearly not athletes, nor have they ever been athletes. So it's just interesting that people are trying to fight this fight when they know nothing about it.
Right. I think that's the thing that is frustrating to us as women who've played sports, to hear men come out and say, well, you're not being welcoming, or someone who has never been involved to say, well, you're not being inclusive. It's like, no, I'm actually speaking from a place of knowing and experiencing this myself. And I have to say that this is a bad idea, but you're not allowed to say it's a bad idea anymore.
You're not allowed. And when I was in middle school, I was a huge tomboy, and I was so adamant. I was like, I'm playing football. You can't keep me off the team. And so I told them, I was like, I'm playing on the middle school boys football team. And it was a private school. So they had no cuts. There weren't enough students to have cuts. So they're like, all right, come on out. And I'm telling you, Tudor, I was out there one day and I was like, never mind. Thank you so much.
That was good. I'm good.
You just don't realize, even though I would like to say the most athletic girl in my class, I still could not hold a candle to these middle school boys. I mean, it just.
But exactly right. I mean, that's what you don't know until you know.
Exactly. And it's nothing against me. I wasn't embarrassed, nor was I ashamed. It's just one of those things like, yeah, I can run fast, but can I run as fast as you? No. I'm strong, but am I as strong as you? No. It's just, do I have endurance? Yes. But do I have as much endurance as you? No. It's just,
it's different. I recently went to my daughter's 6th grade basketball games, and she played basketball this year. Her little friend is a boy, played basketball on the boys team. She wanted to go see him on the boys team. I was used to going to the girls basketball team for weeks. And I thought, really honestly, even though I talk about this stuff all the time, I really thought, how much difference is 6th grade? It's going to be the same game, but it was a totally different game. The boys just play in it much faster, much more aggressive. It's just a different way of playing. And that was surprising to me because they're so young, but there's truly a difference in the way they play.
Well, yeah. And especially like once the testosterone kicks in, you know what I mean? Like in football, once you take a big hit, your body, it just goes into this state where you're ultra fired up. And it's not something you control. It's an adrenaline rush. It's hormonal. And you just hit another level of play. And that's something that women, we experience in a sense of our own, but it's not the same thing.
Yeah, that's interesting. I guess I had never thought about that before, but that is really interesting. I mean, these are the things that I feel like we are not free to talk about. And I guarantee you that when this posts, somebody will say, you're not experts on these things.
Of course.
But we have this experience. You certainly have had this experience. You've watched it. What makes you an expert if you haven't, if it's not that you've played, you've watched it, you've reported on it? I mean, you are deeply into this and you've seen the differences. And it's a shame that you can't just safely say, okay, but can we think about it? Can we think that maybe this isn't the best idea?
Yeah. And, there was an example years ago of the women's national soccer team doing a scrimmage against a grade school boys team. I can't remember exactly what grade it was. They got completely demolished. And it's just, you're looking at a completely different age group. We're professional female athletes versus grade school boys. And they still were, and it's not a knock on the women. It's not to say they aren't phenomenal, fantastic athletes, but just men and women are built differently. Their capabilities are different, and that is never going to change.
No, it will not. So tell us, how do people find you on Outkick? Tell us a little bit about that really quick.
Okay, so the show that I will be co-hosting does not launch until before football season. So realistically, probably sometime in July we're looking at. But until then, I'm going to be plugged into all different types of Outkick shows, filling in as a guest host, doing guest appearances, also all over Fox News Channel, coming on to talk about issues like this. So like tomorrow night, I'll be on Sean Hannity, which is
Great.
Wednesday. And then I'll be on Varney and Co. on Thursday. And then, I'm sure if you go to my social media, I'll keep you up to date of where you can find me. And my socials are at Charly on TV. So I'm so happy to be a part of the family. It's been a great experience so far. And I'm super happy to have my voice back.
Well, we are so happy that you decided to do this. And I think that you are an inspiration to so many young women and really people all across the country. Just know that as many of those nasty comments as you get on social media, there's thousands more people behind you saying, give me a break. This woman's amazing.
Absolutely. And hopefully that voice, that louder one you just mentioned, gets even louder.
I agree. Absolutely. You are inspiring it. Charly Arnolt, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. I really appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Congratulations too. And good luck. You don't need luck though, because what you're doing is already amazing.
Oh, thank you so much. Appreciate that.
And thank you all for joining us on the Tudor Dixon podcast. For this episode and others, go to TudorDixonPodcast.com. You can subscribe right there and make sure you join us the next time on the Tudor Dixon podcast. Have a great day.